What's up, everybody? Will Lucas here, and welcome to the AfroTech Founders Huddle Virtual Summit presented by Amazon Web Services. AWS is the super partner, the ultimate partner for founders, for new founders, and especially if you are trying to figure out some stuff. Your tech's not all the way right, but you need some assistance. And AWS makes tech solutions super duper simple with the AWS Activate program, built exclusively for people like you. People like you who are starting startups and trying to figure this thing out and go get your bag. So since we know how important it is for our community of startup founders to have the resources they need to build and scale their startups, we've partnered with AWS to offer unique mentorship opportunities for people like you, new founders. The purpose of this startup mentorship program is to advance startups at every stage by connecting new founders with experienced mentors, people, experts in the fields like CTO. So if you are looking to get your CTO right, we got CTO best practices. If you're trying to get your fundraising game right, we got people to help you with that. Marketing, product, sales, strategy, and ops. We have slots available for the mentorships, the startup mentorship program right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a link for a session, a one-on-one session, a link at the top of the chat for you to apply and get in the running for these slots. Very limited space, but we want to make sure you can get in on these opportunities. So make sure you click that link at the top of the chat box so you can apply. I do have a couple of housekeeping items before we get to our panel today. We have some remarkable panels. If you are looking for even more founder resources, be sure to take the 3-minute survey, which will be pinned to the top of the chat to be eligible for $100,000 in AWS Activate credits. Please do that before you leave this session today. It's going to be pinned in the chat. Take the 3-minute survey, and you'll be eligible for that $100,000 in AWS Activate credits. To get the most out of this summit, be sure to use the chat feature because we're going to be, looking for the best questions, the best comments to make sure that our presenters can address those things. And so please go ahead and, when you hear a bar, just go ahead, hit it in the chat, and make sure the folks know that you heard that bar and that you took that note, or that you have a question. You want to make sure that your question gets addressed. Make sure you put it in the chat feature. We'll be looking through those questions throughout the length of this session today. So make sure you get engaged in the comment section. We're also going to have some polls going on over there. So please stay engaged on the polls. Speed networking will be available. It's our favorite feature of this whole thing because it gives you an opportunity to connect with other attendees for 3 minutes, allowing you to be able to make valuable connections with other founders and people in the AWS team. So there will be 2 opportunities throughout the day today to take advantage of this feature. So none of us have lived through a time like this, the craziest time anybody alive. Nobody's lived through anything quite like we're going through right now. But you cannot stop a hustler from hustling. You cannot stop somebody who's dead set on making their dream real. You can't stop them. So we're going to be talking to people today who are still writing checks. VCs who are still writing checks even in the middle of COVID. We're going to be talking to people who have built businesses in unique times with unique, makeups. So we're going to be talking to those experts and people who have had that experience today. Too many of us feel like we can't build a company because we're a solo founder, or we can't build a company and we won't get funded because it's COVID, or because we're Black. Because. We're going to dead a lot of those myths today and give you the keys so that you can go ahead and figure out how to make your dream a reality. So we're going to debunk a lot of these myths today and introduce you to some really cool people who will help you on your journey. So right now, I want to get into the first panel, No Code, No Problem, how non-tech founders can level the playing field. They're going to be discussing no-code app development and show you how it can benefit non-technical founders. We hear a lot of pitches all the time from people who don't have technical co-founders or cannot code themselves. So we're going to have this first panel up, and then we're going to have a second panel up after that on how to secure the bag, how to successfully fundraise for your startup. So they're going to be focused on how to pitch to VCs successfully. And these are people who are particularly looking for minority-owned startups to diversify their portfolio. So y'all ready to go? Let's go.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Yeah?
Can you hear me, Tara?
Yeah, you sound great. Awesome. Well, I'm so excited that we both get to be here today on the first panel and that we get to hear all kinds of advice from you, Tara.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
So I was wondering, Tara, I think that some of us know what no-code software is, but how would you describe it for someone that's unfamiliar to that term?
Yeah. And I'll also just give some context and introduce myself too. So my name is Tara Reed. I run a company called Apps Without Code. And so for the last 4 years, I've been teaching people, founders, how to create their own apps, how to create their own businesses around their apps, right? Because it's no point in just having a cool app if the app is not generating revenue, if it's not getting in front of customers, right? So how to build their own apps without having any coding knowledge. I work with people who have no coding knowledge, and I also work with people who do have coding knowledge, but they want to get faster from A to revenue or from A to finished product. So your question earlier was just, what is no code? What does that even mean? So this is how this works. I would say maybe 5 years ago, if you wanted to build an app, you needed to have maybe a computer science degree or know how to code, right? The code is the thing that makes the app work.
Right.
And you needed to have to know that, right, in order to build an app. Or you needed to have a budget of about $20,000 plus to hire someone to build the app for you. And so those were kind of 5 years ago, the options. Now it's possible to create your own app without knowing any code. So the way that this works is you design the app by drag, drop, point, click. Sort of like how you would make a PowerPoint presentation. You drag what you want onto the screen, right? Which we all can do. We can all drag, drop. And then you logically tell the app what to do in English. So instead of it being in another coding language, it literally says, for example, if the user clicks the button, then log them in. It literally says that in English. And so the no code tools allow you to drag, drop, point, click, design your app the way you want, and then tell the app what to do in English, which you already know.
That sounds really easy. It sounds like anybody could do this.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And what's been really interesting too is that there's so many players that are now coming into the industry that are allowing you to create your own tools. So for example, I know you guys maybe have heard that Amazon just came out with a tool called Honeycode that allows you to do this. There are other companies, depending on what you're trying to build, for example, even Facebook has a builder that allows you to create artificial intelligence or augmented reality experiences. So depending on what you're trying to build, there's different tools for pretty much everything at this point. It used to be that you had to code. You now no longer need to do that just to get your product out.
So I know that there's also this other term that's going around that's low code, and there can be this common misconception that low code and no code are the same thing, but they're not, because with no or little code, you still need a developer.
Yes.
What I love about the no code movement is that it's really leveling the playing field for non-technical founders.
Right.
And I was kind of wondering, I wanted to ask you, even though no code is not a new concept right now, definitely with the coronavirus and everything that's hitting our world in the past 8 months or so, there's been a larger movement, and we're seeing a lot more people that have to work from home and have to adapt to being an entrepreneur and working from home. Do you think that due to these, world changes, that you're seeing this adoption increase with your Apps Without Code training course?
Oh, yeah. So for the program that I run, the online school, there's been a significant increase in number of people who are interested in learning how to build apps without code. And I think that actually their stories, the entrepreneurs that I get to work with, their stories actually really closely parallel my story. It's just maybe we're on a different timeline. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that when I first started building apps without code, this was 5 or 6 years ago now. This is before a lot of these tools that are out there now even existed. 5 to 6 years ago, I was working a job. I was working at Microsoft at the time, and Microsoft laid off 80,000 people, and I lost my job. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I know that I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Am I going to go back and find another job, or am I going to take a stab at entrepreneurship? But it really got sparked from having this push of losing my job and getting laid off, right? The thing is that innovation And that could be innovation with your idea, or it could just be like innovation in your life. And what I mean by that is like you getting the push to do something new, to change up the plan, to just like, all right, now I've got some fire under my butt, like, let me go. Like having that motivation or to change something, that always is very often centered around some sort of life push. COVID has been a life push for a lot of us to like change things up, to be like, I'm going to get serious about this now, or I'm really going to move forward. For me, it was like getting laid off from my job 6 years ago that pushed me to do that. But I think that the entrepreneurs I work with now, like they're on that same journey. Maybe COVID was the thing that made that happen. They kind of switched up how they were thinking, but now they're ready to go and they're tired of hitting roadblocks of like, oh, well, you don't code, so you can't do this, or you have to move slower, you have to wait until you have a bunch of money or have a CTO or like all these things. For me, I was like, I'm tired of being stuck. Today I'm done being stuck. I will not be stuck moving forward. And that was sort of how I jumped into this.
That's awesome. And, somebody in your position could have been really discouraged and thought that's it. And you just, you plunged ahead. I'm curious, Tara, what do you think is one of the greatest impacts of the no-code movement?
Yeah. So I think that the biggest impact is that it allows people to have that perspective of, I'm not going to be stuck. Like you're not going to stop me. Right. Because it allows people to just like go and to make money and to generate revenue without getting caught up in those things. Like the biggest impact is who we get to see in tech, right? Like what kinds of founders, what kinds of entrepreneurs, more diversity there because there's fewer barriers.
That's a really good point. I know that I myself am Latina, so the whole having more diverse teammates definitely resonates with me.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, from your experience, what do you think are the best cases for no-code software, and what exactly can somebody build using it if they've never done anything with this?
Yeah, no, awesome. That's a really good question. I'm wondering if maybe I should show a couple examples. Is it helpful for me to give you a sense of what you can do with something like this?
I think that would be great. And I bet our audience would love it. I bet they want to check it out.
Okay, perfect. Before I do that, I would love to hear from the audience. If you guys can maybe type into the chat, I'd love to hear what sort of industry are you looking to serve with your startup idea? Is it education? Is it healthcare? Is it manufacturing? Is it just consumer for anyone? What kind of industry are you guys looking to serve with your idea? Or if you don't have an idea yet, you can type I'm still coming up with an idea. I would love to hear just in the chat from you guys, where you are in thinking about your journey and what you're gonna build. And then I'll show you some examples that hopefully help you see what you can build in some of those different industries. So Kira says career building and job search. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Sort of you don't have to tell me all the details of your idea, but just the category. You totally build job searching platforms.
Oh, awesome. I'm also seeing things like retail.
Yeah, that's right. Retail, totally. Music and entertainment. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter what industry. Sometimes people will ask me, well, what industry can I build a no-code app for? It doesn't matter what industry, right? It just matters what you want the app to do at the end of the day. So let me show you this. I want to show you some examples of apps that myself and some of the folks I've worked with, let me share my screen really quickly, have built.
Freight tracking also came up.
Right.
Research and neuroscience. I love it. It's just everything is just so many diverse different areas. It's not just all tech.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see here. Let me share my screen so you guys can see this. So the first thing I want to show you is an app that I just started working on a few weeks ago. And this app idea I had, I want to walk through this process, right? I one day was on the internet and I was trying to find a online class about YouTube. I wanted to learn more about YouTube videos and creating a YouTube channel and what I need to do there, right? So that was the moment I was in at my computer. And I was wait a minute, I wish that there was some sort of directory, some sort of listing, some sort of community I can go to figure out where the best online classes are for me to learn and brush up on my different entrepreneurial skills, right? So I was looking around for some things. There are some things that existed already, right? Like there's Udemy, if you guys have heard of that. There's masterclass.com. There's a few things where there's like specific content, or there's like a $9 sort of quick course, but like where do I go to find like a coach to help me through it? I was thinking about this in the moment. So I created an app to solve my own problem, like literally in that moment created an app. So what the app does is it has a listing, and you can sort of see the screenshot here. It has a listing of different online coaches and online classes that are available for different things for entrepreneurs. And you can click on one of those classes and you can see like the information of the class and the description, and you can see ratings and reviews on it and add your own review. And so like I created this platform and people can add their own coaches and courses and coaching opportunities on there. So I created this, and in terms of getting the word out, so like I created it in like a couple days, right? 2 days it was done.
2 days? That's really fast.
2 days it was done. 2 days it was done. And then I went on Facebook groups. You know, like you go to Facebook and you type in groups. And I found some groups that had people who were coaches, right? People who taught things to entrepreneurs. And I was like, hey, I just created this app. I'm wondering if anyone wants to be featured on the app. It'll be like advertising for your business, because I needed to have some content that goes inside of my app. Right. And instead of going to get free content, I wanted to see if I could create a business out of it. So I went on Facebook groups. They were free Facebook groups, and I posted this. And I got a bunch of people who were interested, and I got 27 course creators, people who were like coaches, to give me $129 to include their course as part of the app. Right.
Nice.
So this is like my screenshot of my PayPal account, and you can tell that it's a completely brand new PayPal account. I had created it 2 days before, because when you create a brand new PayPal account, they like hold some of your money for a couple days.
Oh, okay.
So literally, like I within 2 weeks, this had set up, and I made over $3,000 with an app that I had created and generated and started putting out there. Right. So like this is the kind of like speed, for example, with which you can work. But I want to show you some other examples of like fun things that people have built. So Brandale is an entrepreneur I've worked with. She had an idea because she likes to go out dancing to like nightclubs. Nice. And she was explaining to me how like it's hard to know which ones are going to be fun and which ones are going to be a waste of time based on what's happening there, right? You don't really know until you get there. And so she decided to take something that she personally knew about and create an app to solve that problem, right? So she went on LinkedIn and she found like owners of clubs, and she messaged them and told them about what she was working on. And she had an idea that she was going to charge the club owners to have their listing, to have their club in the app. And she started doing that. She built the app. There's like a map where you can see different clubs nearby, and you can see like what's going on, like a live feed of what's going on at the club, right? And this is really cool for her because she's able to be like what I call a coronavirus hero, because a lot of these venues have had to completely shut down. And I don't know if you've seen this, there's like this trend of people having like virtual dance parties.
Oh, I did not. Really?
And so now she's allowing these clubs to have these like virtual events all through her platform. And she did this in 6 weeks.
Oh my goodness. So the thing is, it used to be months of development and iteration and testing time. And now we're looking at how the no-code solution can make it to where you can build an app in a couple of days. That's crazy.
Build an app and have actual paying customers in a couple of weeks. Right. Like and this is the thing I would challenge, and I have more examples I'll show you later too. But like I would challenge the audience and say that if you have been working on your app idea for more than 3 months and have not generated revenue, you want to switch up the plan. Something needs to get switched around because all the barriers are removed. And so there's really two big barriers. One is being able to build the actual thing, right? And that's what we're talking about today, no code. And the other barrier is you getting in your own way. Other than that, there are no other barriers to this. I'll show you one more last example because you can do this in all sorts of industries. This is Tracy, who built an app for Black women who have multiple sclerosis. And like, I didn't know this, but she was saying that like scientists are always really struggling to be able to do research with this population. Like they have a hard time reaching them or finding that audience to do it, do research with. So she built an app for scientists and people who are doing studies to be able to reach folks who are Black women, and for Black women to be able to make money by doing like some of the surveys and tests that they have. And so she created this platform for them to do that, right?
Amazing.
Got researchers on board in 6 weeks.
Wow, that is crazy. Wow, this is beyond amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so Tara, I am excited to see more examples, which you mentioned you had even more. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about before you started Apps with Code. We know that you launched the other startup, Collecto.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wondering, what problem were you trying to solve with Collecto? How did you know that it was a wide enough problem worthy of creating a business? What made you think this is a business idea and not just, this is one thing that I personally want to change?
Yeah, no, that's so good. So my first company was called Collecto, and I launched Collecto because I wanted to help people find artwork for their home, like painting, photography, those sorts of things. And I got interested in it because I myself had moved to a new space and was thinking about how I decorate and how I didn't want to just decorate with anything. I wanted to start an art collection, right? Which is a slightly different approach. And I didn't know this at the time. I learned that if you want to have someone help you find art, like an art advisor, you have to have a $10,000 budget and above, because it works like real estate. So they take a commission on it. Right. And so the commission has to be worthwhile for them. So if you want to buy a $100 piece of artwork, they're like, no, sorry, I can't help you. So
makes sense, but ouch.
I was not trying to build a business from the very beginning. I just wanted to create. In reality, I was feeling antsy at work. I was feeling like I didn't have as much creative control at work as I wanted to have in terms of creating and being, responsible in my own role. And there was a lot going on, and I wanted to have something that I had full creative control of. That's where it came from, right? Me wanting to help people find art and wanting to have more creative control at work. And I launched it, and this is actually a funny story. So this is before a lot of the no-code tools existed. So the first version of the product that I built for Collecto, we eventually built, by the way, an algorithm that matched people to artwork based on their taste. Right, so based on what you liked, it showed you art recommendations, and we pulled artwork from all over the internet to show people. The first version of the product that I built, I used a survey to build. So I used a tool called Survey Gizmo to create this. And here's how this worked. People would fill out the form about what kinds of artwork they were interested in. And you know how surveys have show and hide logic? Right. So what happens is you've seen this before, maybe you just didn't know what was happening. You're going through a survey, and the survey asks you what's your favorite color? And you say purple. And then the survey asks you a next question, and it's great, why do you like purple? So it references the fact that you liked purple above and asks you a follow-up question about that, right? But really what it's doing to make that happen is it's showing the purple follow-up question, and hiding the blue follow-up question, right? So it's just a show and hide logic. So I use that same logic to show people art recommendations. So if you said that you liked paintings, I would show all the paintings and hide all the photography. Or if you said you liked abstract expressionism, it would show all the abstract expressionist paintings, but hide all the everything else. If you had a budget of $100, it would show the things in your budget and hide everything else. So it was just doing show and hide logic. And people would message me and they'd be like, oh my gosh, Tara, your app is so cool. And literally all I had done was taken a survey. I think I had paid $29 a month to get the survey tool access, and was using the show hide logic to show people recommendations of artwork. And with that first survey version, I made my first $30,000 in revenue. And so then I was like, oh, okay, I think this might be a business. And we applied for 500 Startups, which is a tech accelerator program, and got our first investment at that point.
Wow, congratulations. So you made over 30,000 with this idea.
Yeah, well, before
right away in the beginning.
Investors, yes. So that was in the first few months.
That is insane. And I do love art and painting, as you can see in the background. I guess I would have chosen in your app the logic about I like the paintings, hide the other stuff.
Yeah, that's what kinds of paintings and what sort of landscape or those sorts of things. So yeah, it was really fun.
That's so cool. So as you were, thinking about what you wanted to do and how you wanted to build this business, how did you weigh the pros and cons of different no-code solution tools?
Yeah.
For you personally, what features were important to you? And what do you think are things that other founders should also consider?
Yeah. So let me answer first the piece about what features were important to me. And it actually ties really nicely into a question that's from the audience about like, how do you launch these apps in the Play Store or an Apple Store? How do you launch them? So there were some things when I was first launching that I thought were going to be super, super important. I'll think back to like my first company with Collecto. I thought it was going to be really important to have like video chat integration as part of the app, so that when you open the app, you could talk to someone and say, like an art advisor, and say like, okay, I saw this thing at the museum. I don't really know what it was called, but like, I like this, to be able to sort of like talk it out with someone. Like you have your own like art advisor, just like you have your own personal stylist for clothes. That was the experience I wanted to create, right? No one wanted to do video chat. Like
really?
No one was interested in that at all.
But it sounds like such a good idea.
It sounded like a good idea to me, but the reality was that if you don't know much about art, talking to an expert about art is really intimidating. Like you feel like you're gonna sound dumb, or like you don't really know what you're talking about. And so no one wants to do it. I am so glad I did not invest a ton of time and money and development resources in building this video chat integration. No one wanted it. And so after having that experience, I really had this 2-part strategy for determining what I should build next, right? Like particularly at the beginning of the product, what I should build next. So the first question was, can I put like a sample of this experience in front of people to see if this is a feature they even care about? Or can I go talk to people and see if this is the thing that they even care about? Before I build anything, can I go validate that this specific feature is something people care about? And the best way to figure out if this is something people really care about, because if you ask someone like, do you want this feature? They're gonna say yes. Like regardless, they're gonna say yes. If you're building an education app, like, do you want the ability to like give grades for all the lessons? They're gonna say yes. If you're doing alternative investments, like, do you want the ability to track what date you made your investment on? They're gonna say yes, like if you give them that option. The better way to ask it is to say, if we built this feature, would you pay more money for it? How much more would you pay? If the answer is like, I wouldn't really pay anything much more for it, you probably can hold off. Which means that you end up building the things that people are like most willing to pay for now. And the whole spirit of no code is around being scrappy and around moving fast, right? The only thing as an early stage founder you really have, because you don't have money, you don't have a big team, you don't have much. The only thing you do have is speed.
That's
true.
true.
Company doesn't have the speed that you have. And so like you have to really leverage that. So this goes back to the question in the chat about, well, how do you launch these apps in the Play Store? There's 2 answers. One, depending on what tool you're using, there'll be a button that you can click to push that to the Play Store or to the Apple Store. You're gonna also have to have a developer account with those platforms. So you'll pay separately. I believe that for Android, it's $25 and for Apple, it's $99 a month. And Android is yearly or one time, right? So Android is cheaper. But there'll be a button where you can push that to that platform, and then you'll connect it to your developer account credentials, right? So you can do it that way. However, the biggest question that I would be asking myself at this point is anyone going to pay me any more money or be more willing to sign up immediately, the first users, if I have something in the App Store versus a web app that I could use first? Right? Because you can usually churn out your web app much faster. And so the question is, can you get this out in a different format that's not in the App Store first, get some money going, and then introduce your other piece?
I see another question in the audience. They're wondering if is there a similar solution for web applications?
Yes. So most of the solutions out there are for web applications. And then there are some that do web and mobile, if that makes sense. So you want to check and like look at what their criteria are. I think that in 99% of the scenarios, you need a web app first. You need a web app first. For example, like if you're not really sure what I mean by web app, like if you go on your computer to facebook.com, you can still log in. It still has all the same information saved about you, but it's on the web. And that way, if you give people the link to facebook.com, they can access it on any device, right? And when you're on your phone, you guys may not notice this. If you go to facebook.com on your phone, it changes to m.facebook.com. And that M is for mobile, right? So it's not the big widescreen, it's nicely fit for a phone. So a web app and a mobile web app for most of you is what you need first. And then later on, you introduce the app in the App Store. It's beneficial for multiple reasons. One, you can move faster. Two, it's cheaper. You don't have to pay the separate fees to the App Store. And three, the App Store used to be the place where like people could very easily discover things, but now there's so many apps there that when you first launch, you're probably going to be at the bottom of the list anyway. And so it doesn't have a big marketing benefit to you at the beginning anyway.
That's awesome. Okay, so I think that this is really helpful for people in the audience that are entrepreneurs, and keeping in mind other first steps that come when you're building your MVP and testing the market. Can you tell us more about how you tested your market? What did you research? What did you learn that was completely new to you at the time? What did your first 30 to 60 days really look like?
Yeah. Okay, so the first round of testing my market was me messaging people on Facebook and my email. In fact, my first paying customer was someone that worked at Microsoft with me, different department, but like also worked at Microsoft. My second customer was someone I went to high school with. So it is very likely that your first customers will be people who are in your circle or in your network in some capacity, particularly if you're going after consumers. The next round of that was me going on LinkedIn and reaching out to people and telling them about what I was building. So for those of you who don't have big networks of potential customers, LinkedIn is a really good place to find customers. And then the third round of reaching out was like I posted on two sites. I posted on betalist.com and producthunt.com. Posted what I was building and got lots of people who were interested from there. So it was this organic reaching out to people, being brave enough to reach out to people and tell people my idea. Like for most of us, there's not this big mystical like thing we need to learn about marketing. We just need to get brave enough to do it, brave enough to talk to people about it, right? Brave enough to start telling people about our idea, even though it's not fully thought through or fully baked or fully finished.
Got it. So what would you say were some of the biggest hurdles and mistakes you had to overcome, and how did you tackle that? Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest mistakes I made were spending time building things that people didn't care about. And then having to like delete that feature or change it or remove it, right? So mainly the biggest mistake I made was not talking to people up front. And I did talk to people up front, but I could have done way more of that, of talking to people up front. And then the second mistake that I made was I would do this weird thing, and it's funny because I see so many of the entrepreneurs that I coach do this too. I would do this thing where I would like talk to a potential customer and I would be like getting their feedback on it, but I would never actually like come down and make the blatant ask for money. It was like I would kind of like tiptoe around it, but like I didn't actually just like make the specific ask. It was a bravery gap on my end, right? Like I can look back now and say like, oh no, I know what that was. That was a bravery gap. And so I think I missed lots of opportunities because I ended the conversation with someone like, oh yeah, I'm working on this, I'm building this, like thanks for your feedback. As opposed to, yeah, I'm working on this and I'm building this. So is this something that you'd be interested in? And then shut up. Just be quiet. If you're on the phone, like when I ask that question and I'm talking to customers, when I'm on the phone, I literally mute the phone, put it on speakerphone, mute it, and put the phone down. I do something else. If they're thinking about it, thinking about the price point, all those things, just let them think. You be quiet. Usually like we'll jump in and like want to change the conversation. So it was a combination of like, because the mistakes I made were one, because I could now build, and I was so excited about building because I could like finally do it with a no-code tool. I was just like building all over the place, not necessarily some things that people cared about. And then also some of my sales strategy, I could have been more like brave about making the ask.
Got it. Okay. So I am curious, if we fast forward past the MVP, did you stay on course on fully just a no-code ad development, or did you ever need to hire any contractors?
No, I've never hired a developer in my life. I kept pushing the boundary of like, the question I kept asking myself was like, okay, we're getting to something tricky. Is there a way to do this without code? That was always the like extra push. Let me like spend some time and play around with this. Oh, actually, I figured out a way to do it where I can use this tool to do web scraping, to scrape all the information, and I can use Zapier to pull that information. Like I always found a way to do something, right? And to get it more and more sophisticated. And also, like as I was growing with the sophistication that I needed, there were more and more platforms coming out that were out there.
So, if we also take the, oh man, I forgot the phrase in English because Spanish is my first language, but playing the devil's advocate, I think is the phrase. If we play the devil's advocate, do you think that there are some limitations with the no-code software?
Yeah, there absolutely are some limitations. Some of the limitations are about which tool you can use, right? So for example, if you are building an app and you need HIPAA compliance, there's really only a few tools that will service that. If you are building an app and you need to be able to connect in to like banking and financial data, there are only some of the tools that will do that. For example, like Bubble might be a good one for you to use in that scenario, right? So there are some limitations just depending on what you're trying to do. You need to use a different tool because there are not a ton of tools to do that. Some of the limitations that I'll like walk through some of the limitations people think there are that are not limitations, and then some other like actual limitations that you just like can't do. And this actually ties into a question that someone was asking about security issues, right? Like if you're using without code, like who owns the information and where does the information get stored, right? So here's how this works. This is like one of the things people usually think is a limitation, but it's not. So here's how this works. Like imagine you are an author, like you write books for a living, and you open up Microsoft Word and you write your book in Microsoft Word, right? Microsoft does not own your book. You just use their tool to build it. So it works the same way with a no-code tool, right? They don't own your idea. You just use their tool to build it, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is like, yeah, but like what about data security? Where does my information get saved? All of that stuff. So the majority of the no-code tools are going to use the same data storage system that you would use if you were building with code. A lot of them use AWS, right? So you're still storing your data, still storing your information in the same place you would be doing if you were building with code. You just don't have to do the work to actually like set up the database at that separate place and connect it in. It's done for you, but you're still being secured in a safe place. Same thing with like, what if you want to process transactions or like money exchange, right? You're probably going to use a Stripe integration. You're not going to actually collect people's credit card information yourself. You don't want to do that. You're going to connect with Stripe, which is going to process the payments. So any of the things where you might have security issues, you're going to be partnering with a much larger company and connecting in with their services because they know how to do that piece and keep that information secure. So that's the same with no code. That's one of the limitations I think people often think that there is. Another limitation that's like a real limitation, for example, is like, let's say you want to create, you know, those like emoji apps where like you get a new set of emojis and they show up on your keyboard, like
kind of like Bitmoji, right? Is one of them, I think.
Yeah, right. So like that's one of the things that like we just can't do that without code yet. But that being said, like, if you're watching this video back like a year from now, that may not be true a year from now. Every time I say something's not possible, someone comes out with a tool for it. Like for example, I used to say that if you want to do like voice activated things, like if you're talking to like Alexa or Amazon Alexa, for example, that you can't that you couldn't do that. But now there's a tool called VoiceFlow that allows you to create your own no-code voice integrations and like connecting into those sorts of tools. So there's all sorts of things that are like now coming out. But I'd say the biggest things that I get asked for that we just like can't do, emoji apps are one. HIPAA compliant apps are still tricky. And there's one more. I used to say augmented reality, but that's not true anymore. Facebook has come out with a tool. There's some level of sophistication with like AI that you still can't do without code, but that's also really quickly changing. Those are the biggest ones that I get asked of, where people are like, I'm just like, oh, we can't do that.
Still though, it sounds like it's progressing at a much more accelerated rate than we can't even envision.
Absolutely. Like the majority of the things that you need to get your app built are possible now without code. And maybe you make a decision to hold off on some of those things, some of the fancier things, until you get some traction and get going. I think one of the questions though that you have to ask yourself, is for the audience, right? Like that you have to ask yourself to determine if you want to go with a no-code tool or not. And I should show you guys, by the way, some no-code tool examples.
Yes, I was actually going to say that as my next question. What?
Let me do that first, and then I'll go into like, how do you know if you should do one or not? Let me show you some examples.
Yeah, I think it'd be really great for us to get an idea of what are some sample no-code software out there, and kind of like your take on the pros and cons that you've identified so far.
Okay, good. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull something up to show you some like examples of sites that I recommend and that we've checked out, and that I teach as well in my program. 1 second.
Of course. Sounds great. Mm-hmm. And while you're doing that, I'm kind of noticing another question where somebody's asking, how do you work through app glitches without an app developer? I'm thinking it's similar to the fact that, you know, they build and maintain the features that you're able to drag and drop into your app. So you should not have to worry about that. Is that correct?
Yeah, when you are building with code, there's this whole concept of there being a bug in the code. Mm-hmm. Right? Some little error that maybe you made. It could be anything, like you capitalized something, or like something happened where like the code's not working because there's some small error. You have to go find and catch what that error is, right? That's a concept for those of you who do write code, like you know this. For those of us who don't write code, we just know that like there's this thing called glitches that happen in an app, or bugs that happen in an app, and we don't really know how that happens. When you're building without code, the concept of like a bug is not really the same, right? It is possible that you chose the wrong thing in the drop-down menu, right? But most of the software tools will actually like give you a big red flag when you put something that doesn't work in there. And then also like there's not this concept of maintaining the code that you have to do. It's like it's not even a thing anymore in that scenario. Yeah, so you're totally right. Okay. I found my tools. Let me show you some examples.
Awesome.
Okay, let me share my screen. And by the way, for those of you who want to see more tools, I actually later on this evening am doing like a more in-depth workshop where I'll show you a lot of examples. So I can post a link for folks to that workshop if you want to come this evening or next week. But let me share my screen. Okay, so quick overview of how no-code tools work so you know what you're looking at, and then I'll show you specific examples.
So I don't think the screen is showing yet. Oh, there we go.
It's coming? Okay, good. So just to wrap your mind around this, code-free tools let you design apps by drag, drop, point, click. Like you put what you want on the page, and then you logically tell the app what to do in English. So you drag, drop, point, click, you put what you want on the page, like that what's happening box, and then you logically tell it what to do in English. That's how this works. Right? Let me show you an example. Drag, drop, you put what you want on the page just like that, and then tell it what to do. So a logic statement is the thing that actually tells the app what to do. The logic statement is the thing that tells the app what to do. Let me give you an example of a logic statement that like everybody here already understands, right? Like here's an example. If I push the first domino, then the other dominoes will fall. If this, then that. Right? Like we all understand this sentence. There's nothing confusing about the sentence. Okay. Let me give you another example. If the user clicks the button, then log them in. Right? If this, then that. Right? We all understand this sentence. So my tip for you is to find logic-based software to build your app, which is what a no-code tool is. It's a logic-based software. So let me give you some examples of logic-based software tools that you can use. One of the tools that I really love is called AppSheet, and I put the name of the tool in the bottom corner, AppSheet. So AppSheet allows you to take a spreadsheet and instantly turn your spreadsheet into an app. You can have photos, you can chart things on a map, sort of Uber style. You can have people sign for things and enter data in. You can do all sorts of things, but you start with a spreadsheet, which effectively operates as like your database. It saves all the information for the app, and then you instantly turn your spreadsheet into an app.
This is really reminding me of Honeycode for some reason.
There's a handful of tools that will start with a spreadsheet, Honeycode, Glide, because the concept is you have to have a database where you save information, right? So it has to begin that way. Mighty Networks is another tool I really like. Mighty Networks allows you to create your own social network app without any code. So everybody gets their own profile. People can follow each other, like each other. There's a feed of posts. There's different conversation areas and threads. You can have an event board. So Mighty Networks allows you to create your own social network app. ShareTribe is a really cool tool that lets you create your own marketplace app. And when I say marketplace, I mean think like Airbnb, where people can buy and sell things from each other, or even like Kickstarter, where people can donate things to each other. So ShareTribe allows you to create your own marketplace. You can see an example right here in the corner. They're selling surfboards, right? That you can rent for different times. Thinkific is a really cool tool. It allows you to create your own education app. So you can have lessons, videos, tutorials, quizzes. If you're in the education space, it allows you to create your own education app.
Nice.
CloudMatch is a really cool tool as well. It allows you to create your own Tinder-style matching and recommendation app. And you can use it to match dates, but you could also use it to go to a organization and match mentors and mentees, right? Stencil is also a really cool tool. It allows you to create your own video game without.
I like this one.
Yes. And the game can go on iPhone, iPad, Windows, or on the web. Right. And again, you can see some screenshot of this where it's if this, then that. You sort of just walk through the logic of it. Here's an example of a game someone created without knowing any code. Someone just me and you and the audience who just built this.
So Tara, for the clarification for people that in the audience that, as you mentioned, probably aren't coders themselves, I noticed you mentioning and kind of explaining pseudocode, right? Because you're mentioning an if-then statement, and you keep using the term logic. Would you explain to the audience what logic means, just in case they don't know?
Yes, and let me stop sharing my screen here because it's perfect segue. And I was going to welcome everybody to the future where you can build your app now, right? We know this is possible. So I'm talking about logic, and you can sort of call it pseudocode. I love that. You're still programming. You're just not using a coding language to program.
Yes.
So you're still programming. It's still programming, right? It's just not with a specific coding language like HTML or JavaScript or Perl. It's in English, right? But you're still programming. So that's why you're mentioning pseudocode, because you're still programming. It's still logic. It's still the same concepts. And that's when I say logic. That's another way to explain it, right? It's no code, but if you're not really sure what code really is, logic is one of the ways that I explain it. If this, then that, because that's how an app knows what you want it to do.
Thank you so much. I know that when I first joined tech, and the first time I heard the word logic, and then people just loved using that word in meetings, and I was like, can somebody just tell me what you're talking about?
Yes. It's like a set of instructions for what to do.
Awesome. I love that. Such an easy and great way of explaining it.
Yeah.
So I am kind of curious, because we are kind of wrapping up on time, but can you tell us 3 of your pro tips and realistic goals for non-technical entrepreneurs so that they can also launch their own businesses?
Yes. Great. Okay. So the 3 main tips that I would have. First one is to build a business let me say it a different way. Build a business that happens to have an app, not an app that happens to have a business. What I mean by that, I'll break that down. What I mean by that is a lot of people want to go and just create an app because it would be cool. Create an app because they want to see it exist in the world, and they leave coming up with the business model for it as an afterthought. right? But really, your customers don't really care that much about the app. They don't care that much about the software. They just want their problem solved, right? Like, even if you look at like Amazon.com as a site, right? We don't really care that much as users. We don't really care that much like what the site looks like and what is on the right panel versus the left panel. You really don't care. You just want that thing delivered. You just want to buy that thing and get it here. Right? And so as a user, you have to remember that like your customers really don't care that much about the app, right? It's funny because we're talking about apps and products and technology, but they really don't care about it. They just want it to be easy. So the first thing that I would say to people is to build a business that happens to use an app. And the way that you do that is by not getting caught up too much in all the technical details. If you have customers who are interested right now, email them the information so that you can get going with them. So build a business that just happens to have an app. That's the first one. The second one is to do some research to find the right no-code tool for you. If you guys are interested more in like learning about the different no-code tools and like when to use each one, I know we have a limited time here, but if someone can type in the chat too, I have a workshop that I do that if you guys are interested in learning more, we can do that. And then also the third thing is to, and I'll get into this more in detail when I do this workshop, but it is to charge real money for people to use your app. Like, yes, if you think an app means it has to be 99 cents, well, you're in trouble. Because it doesn't mean, just because you're building an app doesn't mean, like sometimes when we think about technology and apps, we think free or cheap, which is unfortunate because it's a lot of work to build those things, like for you to build the app, for you to build the product. So the thing that you want to do, and this is one of the things I help people with in my training program, is figure out how do we get people to see this app as really valuable such that they're willing to pay at least $50 a month for it. And for a lot of people, it's really hard to like see how they can make that work. But a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with, they're charging like $3,000 plus for the app. There are a couple different ways you can do that. You can white label, for example, which is one example, which means you can like build the app, find a client, like a business who wants to have their own version of the app, and then you take your logo off and put their logo on. You can do that for an unlimited number of customers, but then you can charge a really high price point because their alternative is to go hire a developer for $20,000 to build it for them, right? So you coming in at like $3,000 a year or $3,000 one time is like way less than that. So there's all kinds of ways to do that. But so to go through them again, it is to, number one, build a business first. Be thinking about how your business works, not just the app. Number two, do some research on the best no-code tools for you. If you are like really not sure, I would take a look at, I'll give you a couple to look at glideapps.com, look at Honeycode, and look at Bubble. Look at those three to start with to choose which tool you want. And then the third one is to charge people real money for your product. And you may need to rethink some things to get there.
That's great, especially the last point, because I know that sometimes due to imposter syndrome, we don't really value the amount of our work and the time that went into it. And we should definitely value ourselves and our work.
Yeah, I had a conversation with an entrepreneur yesterday who's in my program. And she was like, I'm thinking I'm going to charge like $9 for my app. And so we started talking about it, about like what her app did. It helped law firms do recruiting, right, for paralegals. And when we talked about what law firms were currently paying, not for an app, but just for recruiting for paralegals. And it was like, oh yeah, like it's in the 5-figure range. And so how do we go from 5 figures to $9.99, right? There's like a big gap there. And so some of us, like we think that just because it's an app, it has to be really cheap, and it doesn't.
Nice, I like that. Well, Tara, I think that we learned just so much from you. I really like how approachable you made it so that anyone can just jump on board and build things and build their dream jobs, even if they don't want to do the coding themselves. And I have to ask, I'm sure that people want to ask you more follow-up questions, even the ones that are going to your workshop later on. So what's the best way for other founders to connect with you and learn more?
Okay, great question. So the best way to do it is to come to the workshop that I have coming up. Can I put a link in the chat? Is that possible to do here? I don't know if this is going to work. But it is workshop.appswithoutcode.com. That's your link to it. Let me see if I can post this into the chat for you guys. But that's where you would go to get signed up for that. that's the best place for us to like continue the conversation. So you can grab that link. Yeah, I just posted into the chat, so I think it's coming. And then also you can follow me on social media. I'm at TaraReed _ on mainly Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome.
Yeah. So workshop.appswithoutcode.com. I actually have one this evening if you're like, I'm ready to go to learn more and I want to see more examples, because I'll have more time to share my screen.
All right, everybody, you heard, you got to go to Tara's workshop this evening.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yo, hope y'all enjoyed that networking session. Hope you met some fantastic people in that networking room. And thank you to Tara Reid for providing some gems for everybody out there who does not know how to code, but has this brilliant idea for a startup that you're just trying to get off the ground. You ain't found that technical co-founder. You ain't got the hours in the day yet to learn how to code. So she just gave you the jewels and the keys so you can go figure out how to make that thing real. And so now I want to welcome you back to the AfroTech Founders Huddle Virtual Summit presented by Amazon Web Services. We have some partnerships going on right now with AWS to offer some unique mentorship opportunities for new founders like yourselves called the Startup Mentorship Program. Something that we're doing here at AfroTech with AWS to partner you with experienced mentors in the fields of fundraising, CTO best practices, marketing, products, sales, strategy, and ops. We want to make sure you get with the right people to help make your dream for real. We want you to apply today before you leave this virtual summit today. Make sure you apply for a one-on-one session by clicking the link that's at the top of the chat. That link is going to stay there, so make sure you take advantage of that opportunity to get one-on-one with an expert. Also, if you're looking for more founder resources, take the 3-minute survey that's pinned to the top of the chat to be eligible for up to $100,000 in AWS credits. All right, so getting to this next panel number 2, I'm so excited about because again, too many of us feel like, because we're a solo founder, because we can't code, because it's COVID, because we're Black, nobody's gonna fund us, yada, yada, yada. That's not the case. There are still people writing checks today and people who are writing checks to people that specifically look like you. These people want to talk to you. These are VCs, angel investors, funders who are looking for you and your brilliant ideas. They're looking for you and your traction. They're looking for you and your team to get in this game, and they want to fund you. Panel number 2, secure the bag, how to successfully raise funds for your startup. This was going to be focused on VCs who are looking particularly to invest in founders that look like you. So panel number 2, let's go do it.
Hey, thanks for having us, and I'm excited to moderate the session today with Will and Candace. It's a fun fact, actually, is Will Lucas is from Ohio. I'm from Ohio. Candace is based in Ohio. So lots of Ohio represent. I know, Will, you're on the
I have nothing to do with Ohio.
I know, right? You're like the only one who is the Ohio native born and bred. But thanks again. And I guess for quick logistics for the session, what we'll do is we'll do 30-minute Q&A with our 2 panelists here, and then we'll go into some questions from the audience as well. And I'll go through some of these and go back and forth. And I guess for introductions, my name is Jared Hill. I'm part of AWS, and I sit on our venture capital BD team. So in my role, I partner with VC funds across the US to help their portfolio companies access resources at Amazon, and particularly AWS, but Amazon more broadly. And so I guess to kick it off, it'd be great if both of you can introduce yourself. So it'd be great to learn about why you got into investing, maybe a bit about your personal background and what you invest in.
Oh, it's ladies first. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm Candace Matthews-Reckeen, general partner at Late Shift Capital, also founder and executive director at Hillman Accelerator here in Cincinnati. Yes, I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio. And so Ohio girl, born and bred. Got into investing because there just aren't enough investors that look like me. I had raised my own venture capital, ran out of venture capital, and realized it was just because there wasn't enough opportunity for me. So launched an accelerator specifically focused on women and people of color in 2017. You have to fund companies because we are over-mentored, but undercapitalized. So you've got to have a fund to fund folks in an accelerator. So that's exactly why we have what we have. I had a micro fund before this fund, and just announced a $50 million fundraise just a few weeks ago.
All right, thank you. And toss over to Will.
All right, yeah. So I'm the non-Ohioan on this panel. William Crowder. I've been an investor for about 10 years now, specifically focused on investing in diverse founders. Have done it through a variety of different vehicles, including an accelerator, actually a couple of accelerators. I ran a fund for Comcast for several years, which is, probably one of the first, if not the first, fund backed by a corporation that was focused on investing in diverse founders. And today I'm an entrepreneur in residence with Morgan Stanley. I've helped them run their own accelerator, which is focused on multicultural entrepreneurs. We've been doing that for about 4 years now. And I'm a venture partner at a few other funds as well. So very active in the space and very happy to see folks like Candace and others showing up as well, because it's been something that's sorely needed.
Okay, no, thank you. And so maybe we'll start off light and then get more into kind of the meat of it. So I guess to start off really, how do you think about a business that's a viable investment for your either fund or investment, and what criteria do you use for investing in startups?
Sure. For us, we're looking for companies that already have traction. We don't make early bets, so we don't invest at the ideation stage or even, at the MVP level. We're looking for traction, and that's usually traction by way of, users, revenue, or large partnerships. That's typically how we track it. So for us, we're looking for a company that's a little bit farther along. And we're looking for a fantastic founder. It's always founder first. You hear that from every VC. Can that VC can that founder run through a brick wall and pivot when necessary? So I'm looking for a founder with, deep domain expertise, is really a subject matter expert. And lots of folks in our portfolio have advanced degrees. We really like to invest in things that are deeply scientific. And sometimes that it requires that type of work. However, we do have other founders that are running, consumer packaged goods service companies, and it requires something that's a little bit different. So always looking for a great founder, but looking for companies that are in market and have defensible IP.
Excuse me. And then for me, I think many of the things that Candace just said are similar. Although I've had a chance to invest both at the earliest stages, obviously working through accelerators, it's generally an idea at the idea stage, or you have to be able to pivot while they're in the program. So I've certainly dealt with the opportunities to invest at the very beginning, but also have had an opportunity to do Series A, Series B, and Series C investing as well. And I think for me, what I'm particularly interested in is, yes, team is important. Yes, market is important. But I also, I also spend quite a bit of time trying to understand the motivations of the founders. I really want to understand who I'm going to be working with for the next several years, and kind of what they bring to the table. I ideally don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I leave that to the entrepreneur. That should be their job, and they should be able to do that. But I also want them to be able to help me get smart. Not just remain the smartest person in the room, but help me understand more about what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and where this is headed, so I can figure out how I can be helpful. And ideally, I guess the last thing I'll throw in there is, there's a lot of glamour associated with venture capital, but there's also some reality with that, which is there are only certain types of companies that we can literally get involved in and fund. And they're the ones that typically have an incredible exit opportunity. And a lot of businesses don't look like that, but that's something we have to do because it's the only way to justify the capital that we are investing.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. And I think we'll delve into that a bit more later as well. We have one question from the audience, and also it kind of ties into our next question as well, around what are kind of early validation signals you look for in a startup that you're thinking about investing in? So if that's number of users, as our audience question asked, or our audience member asked, or is it if you crowdfunded a certain amount of money, if you have a number of investors already, what do you need to see before you're like, okay, I'll write that check? And then that does change as well if you talk about, again, if you go back to your point, well, the Dream Adventures, early stage accelerator side, versus if you talk about kind of the seed investing side. So it'd be great maybe before you can start off, and Candace, you can add on to that.
So there is no right or wrong answer, or I should say there's no specific answer to that question. Yeah. It certainly will depend on the investor and what they are comfortable with as a signal. For us, when I was at DreamIt, we had some companies that had only been alive literally for 2 or 3 weeks. And one of our best companies coming out of our program was one where they launched the product with about 6, actually they launched it on demo day. So at the end of the program, and they had, I guess going into demo day, they had 5 users. Coming out of demo day, they had 5,000 users, and it just kind of took off from there. So what you're really I'm looking for, is if you're doing something, for example, if you're doing something on the enterprise side, then hopefully you've got at least one customer that's paying, or multiple customers that are willing to use it. so that I have someone to talk to get a better sense of, does this thing really work? Does it solve a real problem for you? Do we think that we can take what you just told me and project that out against the broader market? So we're just looking for something that's reliable, that allows us to hang our hat on this and say, okay, if nothing else, love the team, and they've got some proof points that allow me to say it's time to invest, it's time to get involved. And to your point, it all changes depending on the stage at which you're investing. There are more hardcore metrics that happen in Series A and beyond, but it comes with the territory and depends on what stage you're in and where you want to raise your capital from.
Yeah, for us, there's no magic number. So I'll give a small example. So we announced an investment in a company called Fresh Fry last week. It was a little over a $3 million round. It was our first investment in that company. That whole $3 million is not mine. Let me start with saying that. Like, I'm not writing checks like that at all. So we were one of the investors in that round. Don't come look at me for $3 million. It's not like that. But they're in over 3,000 restaurants. Right. So for us, like that 3,000 number, like that was attractive to us. But their ability throughout COVID to pivot with restaurants kind of being out of service was helpful for us to understand that long-term we could make an investment in that type of company. They're looking into, different ways to use that technology as kind of like a platform technology, and then you can use it in food manufacturing at a higher level. So commercial food manufacturing and beyond restaurant. So for us, there is no magical number. Like he could have come to us at 1,000 restaurants, it would have been just fine. But 3,000 really looked great. And the revenue that was being generated and the patent portfolio that they had grown to that point over, I guess now 3 years, looked really attractive to us.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. I guess, Candace, to add on to that, do you see that there's a difference when it comes to Black founders in terms of maybe some of the metrics or the outcomes that they have to bring when they're trying to get invested in by investors? And that could be from investors, Black investors, Latino investors, or if that's from white investors, if there's maybe some differences, or do you think it's the same type of hurdles in that way?
I mean, as a Black investor, folks look at us and we don't have an opportunity to lose, right? So we can't make bad bets. Every bet has to be good. I think that my majority counterparts have it's a little bit more lenient in their direction. They can make choices. They can have a bad fund one and build a new fund two. Me, I don't feel like I have that kind of the ability to make any mistakes. So I'm held to a higher standard. So I hold my founders to a higher standard. I have to respect the money the entire way through. So I can't make, I don't think, the same bets. And I am probably more cautious than my majority counterparts.
Okay, no, that's helpful context. And maybe to switch gears a little bit. Well, I know you were talking earlier about some businesses just not being venture backable. And I think it goes also to Candace's point about picking the right startups and the right companies. It'd be great to get your insights on that. Like, what is a venture backable company, to help the audience kind of think about that? And then maybe for some companies to that point, they maybe aren't venture backable. So what should they do as an alternative if they aren't a venture backable company?
Yeah. So I guess I'll try to, I want to do something kind of dangerous because this is live. So I'm going to try to do math on the fly, which always gets me in trouble. But if you kind of think about I always tell founders, just think about what you're signing up for. Every time you think about raising capital, what are you signing up for? And so, so if you decide to raise around, say, $1 million, and let's say it's done at a valuation of, say, $4 million. So $5 million is what we would call your post-money valuation. You have now, in effect, sold 20% of the company, right? So you have some ownership in the company. Let's just say you have all of it. So let's say you have 80%, I have 20%. But I'm investing from a fund where I need major outcomes. So if I've got a $50 million fund, my investors are expecting me to probably generate returns of at least 150 million or more. So 3 times that, maybe even 4 times that, in order for me to just be considered solid or good. So in order to do that, then every single deal that I do has got to be a home run. A home run being defined as some company that's going to return the entire value of the fund, in this case, $50 million. Well, if I own 20% of the company, and if I find a way to continue to own 20% of the company, then you got to have a really big exit for this whole thing to matter, right? Like you got to get to $250 million for me to get my $50 million back. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to have 20% of the company by the time that you exit because I'm a small fund. So that means even further out, I'm going to have maybe 5% of the company by the time you exit. And I still need my $50 million. So now we're talking about $1 billion company. So when you get there and you start thinking about what you're doing, are you truly a $1 billion company? And understand if you're in an enterprise, if you're the B2B software company, or if you are a consumer-focused company, we apply different expectations and metrics around how we value your company. So let's just say that I'll give you 10 times your revenue number for your valuation, which is being really generous, depends on what kind of business it is. But if I did that, even in this scenario, that means you got to get to $100 million in sales on an annual basis. So do you see a path to getting there? And then I'm gonna throw one other wrinkle into that, and that is, and I need you to hurry up. So I can't give you 10, 15 years to make this happen. I make the investment and I'm probably expecting it to happen within the next 6 to 8 years. Maybe I can wait if this thing is taking off and looks like the next Uber or whatever, you're gonna go public, but most companies don't. So you are signing up for a lot of pressure. And you have to accept that when you sign those documents or don't do it. And in many cases, the recommendation is don't do it. Don't take money from Candace. Don't take money from me. Don't do that. But seriously, like you have to really kind of understand what the expectations are, because that's what drives VC behavior. And a lot of times we will get a bad rap, like, oh, they pushed the founder out, they kicked up my friend, blah, 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 blah. It's like, look, at the end of the day, the second word in the title of the individual is capital, and they have to make money or they don't have a job. So they're going to do what they got to do to try to get you where they need you to go. And if you can't do that, then they got to get somebody else, or they just got to walk away and focus on another company in the portfolio. So Candace will only get a limited number of shots on goal. And so she's got to swing for the fences every single time. And she's going to have to say a no a lot, and people are going to be mad. But it comes with the territory. It's the only way the business works right now.
If we could just break that one clip up, send that around Twitter, we could be done right now, because now everybody knows this is exactly why you say no.
Yeah, a lot of no's. I'm saying how many no's do you say, Candace, generally, I guess, of the investments you do or the pitches you hear per year?
We see about 2,000, and we make about 12 investments a year.
Yeah, so I guess to give the audience a little bit of context of how many no's happen for most startups that end up sitting in front of an investor or venture capitalist. So I guess to that point, for startups that may not be venture capital, what other options do you think they have in terms of how they can think about raising money for their company? If it's not from an investor like you all, what should they be thinking about as they're trying to build a company that maybe it doesn't hit 100 million, I think to your point, Will, but maybe it's a $20 million exit or a $50 million exit, or a company they just want to build.
Yeah, I mean, crowdfunding is working for some folks. We see some Black founders doing really well with crowdfunding rounds, raising $1 million in days, weeks, or months. That's an opportunity. Working capital does work. I mean, there are ways to go to a bank and get some things funded. You can do a blend. There's a blended approach, but I'll say that I'm an expert in this space and not the space of running companies that are outside of this particular funding mechanism.
Yeah, I think that we're starting to hear more and more folks trying to come up with different models. I think the Kaufman Foundation launched an effort to fund VC in a different way. But fundamentally, VC is always going to be kind of a hit-driven business. There are other ways, to Candace's point, there are other ways of funding it. I don't know all of them at all, but there are, obviously people can borrow money from a bank. Some people can, some people can't, but there are banks that want to lend for these particular purposes. There's revenue-based investing that's becoming more popular now, where if you've got to a point where you're generating revenue, then you get the money in the door, and then as you make money, you pay that out, you pay them off, they get a certain return, and in some cases, they just walk away. So there are other alternatives, and then of course, everyone will always say the friends and family route, but we know that has a limit to it. As I was on a panel yesterday, and they referred to it as friends, family, and fools, and we know more fools than we have friends and family that can write the check. But there are people that, especially in this period of time, that are empathetic, sympathetic, whatever you want to call it, that are looking for diverse founders and saying, I want to do something here. I want to put my money to work. And they may not do that in a way that has the same kind of strings and hooks that you might find from someone like me. So the last thing I'll say about that is then the next question, everyone says, well, who is it? I have no idea. But I can tell you that more people are receptive to a thoughtful reach out, understanding that you may not have the same network that other people have. It doesn't always work. It is somewhat of a Hail Mary, but if done well and done thoughtfully, it can be effective.
No, that's super helpful. And I'll go back to another audience question as well. So for both of you, do you invest in startups that are based outside of the US? And if yes, where? If no, then why don't you invest outside of the US?
We invest in Midwest-based companies, and to date haven't invested in any companies outside of the US. We have invested in companies that have incorporated into Puerto Rico, and then they become US-based. So they've come from Latin and South America, incorporated in Puerto Rico, and we've made one investment in a Puerto Rican company. But beyond that, we're specifically Midwest.
Yeah, I have not done any deals outside of the U.S. It's familiar territory for me, and it's a big territory. So, I mean, for the most part, that's the reason. That said, we're always looking for companies that have the ability to grow globally, but they're based here. And that's as you're thinking about, as an investor raising capital from some other sources, there's only so much they're going to allow you to do, especially when it's a small team. So to try to take over the world is probably a little bit too ambitious for me at this stage.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And thanks for that insight. I guess one more audience question we have before we get back to our list is, what advice do you have for pitching VCs? What should businesses include in their presentation? So that could probably be a whole session in itself. So let's kind of dial that down to, I guess, what are kind of the top 2 or 3 things you look for in a pitch from a startup? Now, let's say once you get past the basics of info team, you get it together, what I guess gets you to the no or yes more so than anything?
Oh, that they know their numbers, that they understand where they are today and where they're going to. So that's super helpful. I would start by saying that it's important that founders reach out in the mechanism that the VC would like to be reached out in. So for us, we take our pitches on our website. We don't take them in our inbox, and we don't take them in our DMs. Low Tony taught me like 5 years ago when I was trying to pitch him that he doesn't take cold intros into his DMs. He was very clear about that. And so, I don't really care for it either. So now that I'm on this side, I totally understand why he was not into that at all. But for me, it's all about the numbers, and whether or not they are realistic. They're all wrong, but whether or not they're realistic. And I'm looking for the market opportunity. Really ugly decks does not matter, as long as you know what you're doing. The team slide matters to me. Because I'm trying to find if they've got what it takes. And I like to see that closer to the front, just so I can see what they're working with. Because a great idea is nothing without a great team. So for us, we ask for a deck and then we ask for a video, just so they come to life off of the page. So we ask for a short video of the team as well.
All right, great. Will, what are your top 2 to 3?
I guess the one thing I would add to that is I want to see the product. So whether that's a demo or you've got the slides built that show images from the product, etc. Like, I want to see what it is that you're talking about, and to get a general sense for how this whole thing works. Does it work? How will it work? Things of that nature. All those other things are important, and there are a million different websites and blog posts, etc., about what should go into the pitch deck. It's all generally the same, but I will say this: I have a limit in terms of how many pages I'm going to look at. And if you bring anything that's more than 15, then you're moving into the at-risk territory, and anything more than 20, it's not going to happen. So you got to catch me at the very beginning, and I think that the one piece of advice I would give people is just kind of, and Candace got this from Low, which is put yourself in the investor's shoes. there are literally hundreds of people, if not thousands of people exactly like you. Don't have the same idea, but they're in the exact same position trying to figure out how to be seen and how to be heard. And the more belligerent you might be about it doesn't make it any more likely that I'm going to respond. In fact, it's the opposite. So you have to put some thought into it, and then understand that if you're dealing with someone who doesn't have a lot of time, then whatever you can do to grab their attention at the very beginning is going to be to your benefit. So whatever it is that is the ideal, whatever it is that's your superpower, if it's the team, great. If it's the product, fine. Make sure those things don't come at the end, because it might not get seen. So everyone talks about in journalism bearing the lead, which is basically the art of taking the best news and saving it for last, and then no one read it. So don't do that. Bring it to the front and then reorient everything else so that it emphasizes what's special about what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, like belaboring the problem. I see that a lot. Like slide.
Yes.
So you've got that title slide, and then it's problem.
Yes.
Problem.
There can't be a build up to the problem.
Right.
Can't do that.
No, that's funny. Yeah, no, super helpful. We had another audience question, which was for people maybe who are either high net worth individuals or entrepreneurs who maybe exit their company at some point. How can they get involved in being angel investors if they don't necessarily want to work, let's say, and be an investor like you? How can they work with small companies and write checks for companies?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say get involved with your local startup ecosystem, find out where the other angels are, learn from them as well. There are great organizations like the Angel Capital Association. So they have a few hundred chapters around the United States. So that's always a great way to get involved. And there are lots of cities around the country where you have, African-American CEOs that get together and invest together. So sometimes those happen outside of ACA or Angel Capital Association. So there are a lot of different mechanisms to learn how to invest as an angel. I would always lean toward getting some angel education first. Treating it like any other asset class and learning what it means, know how much money you're setting aside to invest as an angel investor, and get some reps in of like listening to pitches before you make any investment. So we have quite a few angels that invest alongside what we do, and we require that they at least take Angel 101 through ACA. Before they start to invest in our companies, because the last thing you want to do is, and most of them are celebrities or athletes, the last thing you want to do is see them use their wealth and tank it based on their inability to really understand that type of investment class.
Okay, no, super helpful. And maybe to shift a bit then, I guess, Will, we commonly see, and I think this is something that Candace touched on a bit as well, but around Black founders being over-mentored and undercapitalized. And so it'd be great to get your thoughts, Will, maybe also Candace, you can join on as well about kind of your thoughts on that and what founders can do and how we can shift that narrative and reality a bit more.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, it's an interesting topic because it's the undercapitalization component of that makes it makes everything else look insane, right? Like everything is out of whack because we've been undercapitalized. You bring the money, you bring in more of that capital, you bring that into balance, and then everything else starts to feel like it has been reoriented as well. So this notion of being over-mentored is because that it is literally the absolute least that anyone could do, which is to tell you a little bit about myself and what I've done and how what I've done can be helpful to whatever it is you're doing. When the whole point of this conversation is about, I need to raise capital so that I can actually find out if I can do the same things that you've already done, in which case your advice becomes way more valuable. It means nothing to me without capital. So my concern is that we're about to see a new wave of that, which is, I've had plenty of my colleagues in the space reach out and say, oh my God, really sorry. How can I help? How can I make our business better? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, you got two things you can do. The first thing is you can invest your money and your capital. And the second thing is you can invest your time and your expertise. And then the response is, well, let's take the second one first. I'm like, well, hell, we'll never get to the first one.
Yeah.
So, so I think that, so in other words, it is a real phenomenon. And I think at this particular moment in time, we have to start being a lot more forceful, not angry, but forceful about specifically what is it that I'm looking for. And to line that up in a way that there is no wiggle room about the expectation of this conversation. I'd love to hear about your stories, but first and foremost, we need to understand if you are currently investing or not. Because at that point, we can frame the conversation, and I can very quickly, much like I told you earlier, don't bury the lead, then don't allow the investor to bury the lead either. If you're not writing checks right now, then I can come back and talk to you at some other point in time. But right now, every minute of every day is spent trying to find those people that are going to invest in me. I got to find my tribe. And respectfully, would love to tell you about it after I do, since it doesn't look like you're going to be a part of that. It doesn't devalue the advice. I think it's important, and I think you should take it from people that are well-meaning and have information for you that's helpful. But we kind of do this to ourselves to a certain extent because we continue to go and try to get this information, thinking if we just listen to the information, then at the end of this, they're going to give me money, and then they don't. And so we need to start figuring out how we put them in the appropriate box, in the appropriate category on the front end, do our homework, and then give them that multiple choice question that only has two answers. Yes, I'm investing. No, I'm not. And then you can figure out what else you want to do after they've answered that question.
Snaps on that. I got nothing to add.
Yeah, nothing to add on that one, so that's good. All right, cool. So we have another audience question here, and maybe I'll kick this to you, to Candace. What is advice that you have on pitching social impact businesses? That's what it came to. And then, do VCs value the company mission, or is it all revenue based?
Okay, so there are standard venture capitalists, there are social impact investors. I'm a VC, so I'm looking at revenue based. If they have a great mission, that's a value add, as long as it's not taking away from the bottom line of the company. So for me, I'm respecting the money of my LPs, and we're looking for revenue. There are social impact investors, they're looking for potentially a lower rate of return, but we're looking for market rate return. And so you would have to seek that advice from a social impact investor.
Okay. The one thing I would add on that is I think that understanding who are the investors, who are the ones that typically are looking to invest in social impact, and how is that defined, and how do you define it? Some of the businesses are impact-driven businesses and they can generate venture returns. And then there are others that are literally not in it for that at all, because they want to see a greater number of jobs being created, or they have some other metrics that are going to resonate with some and perhaps not with others. But again, it's about finding your tribe and just making sure that you are literally pitching the kinds of people that are going to respond to that which you are pitching. That will eliminate a lot of frustration that people have.
Okay, no, super helpful. Thank you. So, Candace, I guess for people who are trying to secure money, trying to get investment, how do they build a relationship with a VC like you, or with an investor in general? And so is it, code email you? I don't know. Come by the office, say, hey.
Nope.
Don't show up at the office. Knocking on the door.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty vocal about this because there's just only so many hours in the day. So we take all of our pitches at lightship.capital. So find out what the VC that you're looking at, like find out what sectors they invest in. Just because they look like you doesn't mean they only invest in companies with people that look like you. So not all Black investors only invest in Black companies. So find out what sectors, find out what geography matters to them, find out what stage of company matters to them. But for us, we take them through the website. There's a standard application. If you apply for Lightship, you also can apply for every other program that we offer. And if you come to my inbox by way of a co-investment relationship, I totally take that in my inbox. But if it is a cold email, I send you to the website. If it is in my DMs on Twitter, I send you to the website. If it is in person, I send you to the website, and that is the only way I take them. And that is simply because you're going to die in my inbox, because no one is following this rule. So you're going to die in my inbox. There are media inquiries in there. There's everything else in there. So don't go to my inbox. I'm not the only person on the investment committee. So there are other people on my team. You can find them on the website. So if you want to get to know them, it's a long-term relationship. So get to know the people that are on my team as well. Our first investment was in a company that we've known for a year. And so we've been working with that company for a really long time. It wasn't just kind of like a net new relationship. So find out, like, some VCs want to talk to you 10, 15 times before they make a decision, right? They want a certain number of hours that they're with you before they make an investment. And you're going through that due diligence process. But for us, like, website.
Oh, website. Well, I guess let's double click on that a bit more. So let's say, for example, a founder is just really early. Would you have them still just give you your pitch on the website, talk to them and say, actually, you're too early, let's talk again later, and then start the process that way? Or I guess, how do you see that relationship evolution happening with you?
Well, because I wear two hats, so I have the fund, but I also have an accelerator. For us, like, if they're too early for funding, we'd like to take them through a program to maybe get them to where they need to get to, or get to someone else, right? So run them through programming, help them better understand, like, that there's a gap somewhere, and introduce them somewhere else. We've taken companies from Founder Gym through our NUMI program through Hillman. And so there are different ways, and we may not be the right investor. We may need to send them off and shuttle them over to someone else. So no, I think that relationships are long-term, and it's important. It is at least my mission as well to, like, help the culture, right? So I'm trying to make sure that people are ready and they understand why I said no. I said no because you don't know what MVP means, or I said no because your deck was trash. So, like, we've got to figure out how to get them to a better point. But no from us doesn't always mean, like, no forever. It just means no for right now, or no, this isn't the right sector, I'm going to send you to someone else.
Okay, no, that's helpful. I guess for Will, we know Candace's website. You gotta go to the website. But how do you think about, again, the building relationships with either founders that are looking to raise money or just in general, and the best way to kind of build a relationship with you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess things may be a little bit different now that we've been in this lockdown situation for the last several months, but previously it would probably be easier for someone to find me in different settings and to catch me there. I'm not a big person online. Like, I'm not on Twitter. I'm hardly ever on Twitter. I'm literally never on Facebook, so that's not an option. I do kind of live on LinkedIn. I don't encourage everyone to go to LinkedIn, but what I will say about that is you will get a good sense of what I've done in my own background. And so there are so many different touch points there that may make it easier for you to figure out how do I best connect with him, not necessarily directly, but also through some of the people that know him. My best, the highest quality sourcing network that I have are founders that I've funded before, because they know exactly how I operate. They know what I like. They know what I don't like. They know how I tend to invest, and they know what it's like to work with me. And so I think that if you are trying to connect with me, or if we've met in some other setting and you're trying to figure out if, hey, I should let this guy be an investor or not, you're gonna talk to them and they'll tell you, yay or nay, this will be a good idea, or no, it's not. But they will frequently come to me and say, hey, I think I have someone you should take a look at. And every time they tell me that, I'm taking that meeting. That's a guaranteed call that I'm going to take, or a pitch that I'm going to respond to. So I would encourage you to kind of get to know the investors that you're targeting, not just them personally, but I mean, basically our resume is who we've invested in more than anything else. And so it's a great way to kind of do your diligence.
Okay, no, that's great. And thanks for the context there. I guess shifting a bit more, so that the narrative has definitely changed in the last kind of month or so around trying to support Black founders, trying to bring in more Black investors. I think as some of the people in this, I guess the audience thinks about reaching out to people about investment And if that's to Black founders, I think to Candace, to your point, just founders who invest in their area, are there things they should worry about or gotchas with this kind of, I won't call it a fad, but this pseudo shift towards we're all trying to support and invest in Black founders, but then they get to the door and maybe it's something they didn't realize that may catch them and hit them in the butt. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on what people should be wary of, because I just noticed this in like it's article after article. Everyone seems to have a new fund that's popping up that either sideways supports Black founders or women founders, and I was just like, it's a big narrative change that's happening at the moment. And I'm like, I don't know if all these people are really that genuine how they are, but I'm just curious if y'all got any thoughts on that. Because people have been doing it for a while, right? It's like people have been doing this for a decade, really been trying to support either if it's like local founders, Black founders, women founders. And then I'm like, I looked up and it's a lot of new folks who just came out of nowhere. I don't know, capitalize.
Candace, you can start with that one.
That's because everybody knows I'm going to be super, super honest about it. Yeah, I mean, like what? SoftBank popped up with like $100 million, and there's a smaller group that I've seen that just committed, I think, $2.5 million to Black-led funds.
Oh, Oregon.
And which is fantastic. There needs to be 100 more of those, but what scares me a little bit is, I'd like to see that first person go through and be the guinea pig of the situation, because like I think that we see commitments, but we don't necessarily see execution yet. There's a well-known fund here in Ohio that was a diversity inclusion fund. Started like 4 years ago. They put $10 million out, said we're going to put this into minority founders, and what you see is like 80% of the portfolio is white women. And all the marketing material looks like Black founders, et cetera, et cetera. It's a investment committee of 7+ old white dudes. And I'm afraid for all of these new funds popping up, are we allowing, Black people, not just people of color, but Black people to be on the investment committee? Are they making the investment decisions? And then long term, who's managing that relationship? Because these things matter. And are they getting meaningful investments, right? Or are they getting small, amounts of money that should be non-dilutive grants, right? I'm not saying that $25,000 isn't meaningful to someone, but what I don't want to see is somebody coming out making $125,000 bets. I'd like to see something meaningful happen so that people can execute on a goal. So I'm fearful of that. I'd also like to see just us managing money. I'd rather see more of that. So while SoftBank's situation is admirable, and if they wanted to throw in, like if they can hear this, they're welcome to. I'd like to see more people putting money into Black GPs, because that I truly believe that allyship hasn't gotten us anywhere, and we have to make that change.
Yeah. I mean, I say proceed with caution, because many of us have been here before. Like, we've literally been living this for the last 10, 15 years. So, I told someone the other day, like, you are feeling like the whole world is moving so quickly, but literally we're just waiting for you to catch up, because we've been saying this to you for the last 10, 15 years and you weren't listening. So much like a lot of other stuff that's happening, that's the theme of 2020, is that you weren't listening. So this is why we are where we are. I don't know how much of this is real. I know the press releases are real. And I also know that in some cases, the intention is real. But I also know that experience has taught us that beyond the press release, that's where all the work really gets done, if there's any work that's going to be done. So don't be blinded by the fireworks. Today's July 5th. You know what I'm saying? Like we've seen all the lights, and that was great. But what we need is some real action to be taken, because this is a problem that was created 50 plus years ago. It's not going to be solved in 5 months. That's not feasible. That's not possible. So how do we hold everyone accountable to what they've said? And that's on us to do, because there are so many different ways for this money to just disappear. Hey, we committed $100 million back in 2020. Oh, we finished it early. We're ahead of time. So it was great, And we see that as a fantastic investment opportunity, but we're not putting more money to it. We're just saying we're done early and we're going to move on to something else. And that's insane, right? And so if we allow them to get away with that, then that's on us. The other thing I'll say is that Candace is right. Like this notion that all of a sudden everyone has now gotten religion and they're going to fix it. Like that like we can't possibly be that gullible on something like this. This doesn't require them to just say that they're going to put money in all of a sudden, or that somehow all of a sudden my calendar is available to you and I want to meet you in the month of June. Like, well, what about July and August and September? Like, this has to change. There needs to be a systemic change to the way that this business operates and the way that it engages with diverse founders. And so the only way that's really going to happen is if there are more diverse investors involved. Nobody's ever changing the system to our benefit when they won't allow us to play at all levels of sport. Like, that's not the way this works. So we have to be in the room. We have to have the capital to be able to make the decisions. And yeah, there are going to be some businesses that are going to blow up, and it's going to be because Candace was a lead investor, not because someone said, oh, well, Candace was a part of this, but it was really Sequoia or Kleiner that changed the game. It's like, no, they've had 50 years to do that. No, they started the industry. So they haven't earned the trust that says we should now believe that 2020 is going to be different. They can come along, but we're going to be playing too. And I think that's what everyone's got to acknowledge and recognize and support that. Like, this is going to take more than just, these funds saying, hey, we've now figured it out. We want to be more diverse. Now go give me a whole bunch of money from the pension funds. Like, no, pension fund, you don't get to do it that way anymore. You actually have to give that money to some other people who represent the opportunity, because their track record suggests they know how to find diverse founders. The other firms' track record suggests they don't care about diverse founders.
Yeah, and let me double click on that real quick. So, William, you said in the beginning, and I'm sorry if I'm going to speak out of turn here, but I'm just going to speak from my observations. So, William's been an investor for 10 plus years. And at this point in his career, he should have $500 million plus assets under management. I just happen to be the newest.
Your mouth to God's ears.
What'd you say?
No, I said from your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah. Right now, I just happen to be the newest, hottest thing. And at some point, people are going to stop thinking that they should invest in me. It's BS that William doesn't have a very giant fund. This is obviously an issue. They should be funding folks like William, right? It shouldn't just be what comes out right now. And so this is an issue. Low Tony should have a much larger fund. He should be deploying more capital. And this is a problem year after year after year. So, I call out the BS. More money needs to be going into the people that came before me. I shouldn't have the largest fund raised by a Black woman in the country, like first time fund, $50 million, that's 35 companies, you guys. It's nothing. It's nothing. So that's my rant. I want to see them do better than this.
No, I appreciate that. I think the one thing I'll throw out there, because I know we're about to wrap up, is this notion that there's too much money being thrown at this issue. At this point, it's not possible. $130 billion of venture capital was raised last year. $130 billion. And of that, maybe Black founders got 1%, 1.3 billion. So there's a ton of money that needs to start to be rebalanced, and it needs to be flowing to, ideally, I hope it does flow to me, but not just me. There are a lot of people like me. There are a lot of people, there's a place for all of us at the table, and that's true from the investor side, and it's true from the founder side. So for those of you out there looking to raise capital, wanting to do your thing, the money is out there. So hopefully we're going to see some changes that makes it possible for you to get it and get what you need and to go and kind of go where you want to go. But it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of pressure, so we can't let up.
Okay, no, that's helpful. And I guess to close out, because here probably have about a minute and a half or so to go, it'd be great if both of you give kind of 30 seconds and end on what, I guess, again, as we go forward and as a lot of the people who are founders are trying to look to raise money, what can they do? And what's kind of the next action step they can immediately do to, one, either get angel funding or get investing for you, or think about the next steps of building their business. And so be good to hear kind of the good sides as well of how they can kind of close out on getting the bag and securing money.
People are writing checks right now. We're writing checks. Other people are writing checks. So, just keep hustling it up. I mean, oh my gosh, just pitching this fund, we've pitched over 100 funds. I know that, as Brian raised money from his last company, he pitched 1,000 investors. Like, keep going out and doing it. And don't give up. If you feel and your team feels like you've got something valid, just look for the investors that are, in your lane, and it will happen.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the thing. I mean, I think I said earlier, like, find your tribe. Like, this is really important to do that filtering so that you are going after the most target-rich environments you can. Understand what it is that you're doing, understand what it is that they're looking for as a potential investor, and then ensure that you can facilitate those conversations. Please don't do the spray and pray approach, because that's going to become extremely frustrating, and you're going to find that mismatch is what's going to waste your time, and that therefore is going to waste your money, and you're going to be on the sidelines. So find your tribe.
All right, well, thank you both for those closing thoughts, and then thank you as well, AfroTech, for having us. And again, if you do have questions in the audience, you can always hit me on Twitter as well at Jared M. Hill, and you can go through any of these other points you have thoughts about, and then we can connect with the investors as well. Thank you all again, and thanks for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
I do appreciate all you guys for joining us for AfroTech's Founders Huddle Virtual Summit presented by Amazon Web Services, and big shout out to all my Ohio folks out there. And William Crowder, you my guy too, so I love you, man, even though you're not from Ohio. It's all good. Reminder to take advantage of the 3-minute survey, which is pinned to the top of the chat, to be eligible for 100 grand in AWS credits. You do not want to miss out on that opportunity, especially if you're starting a startup. You want to get all the stuff you can get that will help you support, that will support your journey on being able to be a successful startup founder. Also, take advantage of the opportunity to connect with experienced leaders in your startup domain. That is also in the chat, so make sure you click on that. You get one-on-one connected to an industry expert, somebody who could be in ops and sales and marketing and product. Somebody is there to help you, so apply. And then take advantage of the networking opportunity, which is coming up next with my man DJ Critty. He's going to be taking us out. Go in the networking feature over here right now. And I appreciate you guys being here. Will Lucas, AfroTech. Talk to you guys soon.